former Kansas Governor Alf Landon.
Please, to greet all of you who appear to be a record attendance in this field house to this fifth convocation in the series of Alfred M. Landon Lectures on Public Issues. I'm impelled to observe that with such a large and enthusiastic audience, it's almost tragic that we can't pass a collection plate. I'd like at the outset to make some introductions. First of all, Dr. William Boyer, head of the Department of Political Science and chairman of the Student Faculty Convocations Committee, who has made arrangements for today's convocation. Dr. Boyer.
Sure, President McCain, students, faculty, friends, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. In the past few months, during the course of the Landon Lecture series, students at Kansas State University have had the singular opportunity of hearing from those men who, through their outspoken concern for the direction of their country, have gained national and international attention and prominence. With each lecture, student attendance grows. And among educational institutions in the United States, Kansas State University assumes even greater stature. Your university has derived greater respect from all Americans who wish to understand more fully the world in which we live. Much of the credit for the development of this lecture series should be given to a public figure who is here with us today. A man who has chosen to publicly disagree with the President of the United States on foreign and domestic policy. A man generally considered more progressive in his views than the present national leadership of his party. A man who made the courageous decision to become a candidate for the President of the United States. That man, of course, is Governor Alfred Landon of Kansas. Respect for this man that has drawn speakers of prominence to this campus to take part in this lecture series. It has been a privilege for me to be included as a guest at these lectures. We are especially pleased to have Senator Kennedy here today. Our families have been friends for many years. I have great respect and great admiration for him, and as governor, it is my privilege to welcome you to Kansas, Senator Kennedy. Thank you.
Introduction to a Kansas audience. As you know, as a land-grant university, Kansas State University requires support for many programs from the federal government. And I'd like to acknowledge before this audience the wise and vigorous and enterprising support which Senator Pearson has unflaggingly given to this university when we have needed his assistance in Washington. Secondly, I would remind you that it is fitting that he introduce our speaker for two reasons. First of all, he is a colleague of our speaker in the United States Senate. And secondly, they're old-time friends because they were classmates at the law school of the University of Virginia. It's my great privilege to present to you at this time Senator Jim Pearson.
Dr. McCain, Governor Darking, Governor Landon, distinguished guests, students, faculties, and guests at this Landon Lecture. I should first like to make some expression of the great office I think that these lectures perform in a time where all of us need to know every side of every issue, and indeed every side of every man. And I think in bringing these outstanding Americans to our state, that Governor Landon and this institution performs a service for the public good. Now, as a very old friend and a classmate, I'm pleased to have Bob Kennedy come to our state to see our institutions, but more important to see our people. And as a colleague in the United States Senate, I'm pleased that he's here, for he brings dedication, knowledge, and conviction to the subjects he'll discuss. And as a Republican, I'd like to say, particularly in view of his announcement last Saturday, that I look forward to serving with him in the United States Senate for many years to come. As an old friend, or as a colleague, yes, even as a Republican, I'm so very pleased to present to you a very great American, the distinguished Senator from New York, Robert F. Kennedy.
Governor Landon, Governor and Mrs. Docking, Governor and Mrs. Landon, excuse me, Governor and Mrs. Docking, Senator and Mrs. Pearson, President McCain, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate the introduction by Senator Pearson, and if you examine his words carefully, I thought that it was an endorsement. I also look forward to serving with him because I think the President of the United States and the Senate of the United States must serve together in the interests of the United States. And I saw some signs from my other colleague, for Senator McCarthy. As you know, I promised to work in harmony with Senator McCarthy. Our slogan might be, "In your heart, you know each of them is half right." So I'm looking forward to this campaign. I am told that President Johnson told a friend that he was relieved that I was running for President of the United States because he said that it was my support. He said that it was Kennedy's support that was killing him. That was what his. I said last week that I was reassessing my position after the New Hampshire primary. I have a feeling that since that time that the use of that word might have been a mistake. Yesterday, there were 3 men from the Internal Revenue Department at my house reassessing my home. There has been a good deal written about the conversations with Secretary of Defense Clifford about setting up a commission to study the war. Really, the only difference between all of us was the makeup of that commission. I suggested and wanted Senator Mansfield, and Senator Fulbright, and Senator Morse, and the President, in his own inimitable way, he wanted General Westmoreland, John Wayne, and Martha Ray. Delighted to be here. I'm very pleased because of Governor Landon, who President Kennedy had the greatest affection for. I think Governor Landon, I know, was at the White House and visited with President Kennedy. President Kennedy talked about it frequently afterwards. And he told me after he visited with Governor Landon that he asked the governor, why aren't there more Democrats in Kansas? And I don't think we ever got an answer to this day. But I know how highly he was regarded by President Kennedy and how highly he is regarded all across the United States, not just in the state of Kansas, but all across the country. And I'm delighted and honored to be able to come here and speak in his name. I'm also pleased to be here with Governor Docking, for whom I have the greatest respect, who I think is one of the great governors of the United States. And who has contributed so much, and his family has contributed so much to this state. And as for Senator Pearson, I'm also pleased to be here with him. I know colleagues go through the form of saying people are distinguished and they are worthy and all the rest of it. But the fact is that Senator Pearson has made an enviable record in the United States Senate, that he's highly regarded by his colleagues on the Republican side, but held in great respect and with great affection by all of us on the Democratic side. And I'm delighted and pleased to be able to serve with him. Actually, I feel I have a lot in common with all of you. The reason I'm here is that someone sent me a history of the city, and I found out that it was founded by people from Chicago who came to Kansas to found a town named Boston, which they later changed to Manhattan. So I knew with all my problems I'd be right at home. You changed your name, I changed my location. So I'm proud to be here, and I'm proud to be with all of you. I'm also glad to come to the home of another great Kansan who wrote, "If our colleges and universities do not breed men who riot, who rebel, who attack life with all the youthful vision and vigor, then there is something wrong with our colleges. The more riots that come on college campuses, the better the world for tomorrow." That's what he said. And the man who wrote these words was that notorious man, William Allen White, late editor of the Emporia Gazette. He is an honored man today, but when he lived and when he wrote, he was often reviled as an extremist, or worse, on your campus and across this nation. For he spoke as he believed. He did not conceal his concern in comforting words. He did not delude his readers or himself with false hopes or with illusions. It is in this spirit that I wish to talk with you today. But this is a year of choice, a year when we choose not simply who will lead us, but where we wish to be led, the country we want for ourselves, and the kind that we want for our children. If in this year of choice we fashion new policies out of old illusions, we ensure for ourselves nothing but crises for the future, and we bequeath to our children the bitter harvest of those crises. For with all that we have done, with all of our immense power, and with our immense richness, our problems seem to grow, not less, but greater. We are in a time of unprecedented turbulence, of danger, and of questioning. It is at its root really a question of the national soul of this country. The President called it restlessness. While cabinet officers and commentators tell us that America is deep in a malaise of the spirit, discouraging initiative, paralyzing will and action, and dividing Americans from one another by their age, by their views, and by the color of their skin. There are many causes. Some are in the failed promise of America itself, in the children that I have seen starving in Mississippi, idling their lives away in the ghetto, committing suicide in despair on our Indian reservations, or watching their proud fathers sit without work in the ravaged lands of eastern Kentucky. Another cause is our inaction in the face of danger. We seem equally unable to control the violent disorder within our cities, or the pollution and the destruction of the country, of the water and the land that we use and that our children must inherit. And a third great cause of discontent is the course that we are following today in Southeast Asia, in Vietnam. In a war that has divided Americans as they have not been divided since your state was called Bloody Kansas. All this, questioning and uncertainty at home, divisive war abroad, has led us into a deep crisis of confidence in our leadership, in each other, in our very selves, and as a nation. Today I would speak to you of the third of those crises. I would speak to you of the war in Vietnam. I come here to this serious forum in the heart of the nation to discuss this war with you, not on the basis of emotion, but on the basis of fact. Not, I hope, in cliches, but with a clear and discriminating sense of where the national interest of this country really lies. It may be that our views on this war will not be in agreement, but what is important is that we discuss our views, that we discuss the facts, and then seek strength in the enduring impulses which have always united this nation, in the faith that we as Americans together can master and bring to our service the enormous forces that rage across the world in which we live. I do not want, as I believe most Americans do not want, to sell out America's interest, to simply withdraw, to raise the white flag of surrender. I am not suggesting that, and I don't think any other reasonable and responsible American is suggesting that. But I also say that the only course of action that we can take in Southeast Asia, that we can take in Vietnam, is not necessarily, and in my judgment is not, the action that we are taking at the moment under the leadership of President Lyndon Johnson. But I am concerned, as Senator Mansfield and Senator Cooper and Senator Fulbright are concerned, as General Shoup and General Norstad and General Ridgway are concerned, and as Eugene McCarthy's brilliant New Hampshire campaign and the work of those who are associated with him has shown, most Americans are concerned that the course we are following at the present time is deeply wrong. I am concerned, as I believe most Americans are concerned, that we are acting as if no other nation existed against the judgment and the desires of neutrals and our historic allies alike. I am concerned that at the end of it all, there will be only more Americans killed, more of our treasure spent, and because of the bitterness and because of the hatred on every side of this war, more hundreds of thousands of Vietnamese slaughtered, so that they may say, as Tacitus said of Rome, they made a desert and they called it peace. I don't think that's satisfactory for the United States of America. I do not think that that is what the American spirit is really about. I do not think that that is what this country stands for. Let me begin this discussion with a note both personal and public. I was involved in many of the early decisions on Vietnam, decisions which helped set us on our present path. It may be that the effort was doomed from the start, that it was never really possible to bring all of the people of South Vietnam under the rule of the successive governments that we supported. Governments one after another, riddled with corruption, inefficiency, and greed. Governments which did not and could not successfully capture and energize the national feeling of the people. If that is the case, as it may well be, then I am willing to bear my share of the responsibility before history and before my fellow citizens. But past error is no excuse for its own perpetration. Tragedy is a fool for the living to gain wisdom, not a guide by which to live. Now as ever, we do ourselves best justice when we measure ourselves against ancient tests, as in Sophocles. All men make mistakes, but a good man yields when he knows his course is wrong, and he repairs the evil. The only sin, he said, is pride. The reversals of the last several months have led our military to ask for 206,000 more troops. This weekend it was announced that some of them, a moderate increase as it was described, would soon be sent. But isn't this exactly what we have always done in the past? If we examine the history of this conflict, we find the dismal story repeated time after time. Every time, at every crisis, we have first denied that anything was wrong, and then we have sent more troops, and then we have issued more confident communiques. Every time we have been assured that this one last step would bring victory, and every time the predictions and the promises have failed and have been forgotten, and the demand has been made again for just one more step up the ladder. But for all of the escalations, all of the last steps, they have brought us no closer to success than we were before. At every occasion, at every time, we have responded to the crisis in Vietnam with military action. We have looked upon the conflict in South Vietnam as just a military conflict. It is not just a military conflict. It is a political and a diplomatic conflict, and we have ignored those two areas. And that's why we're in the trouble we are today in March of 1968. Rather, as the scale of the fighting has increased, as we have sent more money, as we have escalated, South Vietnamese society has become less and less capable of organizing and defending itself, and we have more and more assumed the whole burden of the war. In just 3 years, we have gone from 16,000 advisors to over 500,000 troops, from no American bombing of the North or the South to an air campaign against both, greater than that waged in all of the European theater in World War II, from less than 300 American dead in all the years prior to 1965 to more than 500 dead in a single week of combat in 1968, 509 this past week. And once again, the President tells us, as we have been told for 20 years, that, and I quote, we are going to win, that victory is coming. But I ask you, what are the true facts? What is our present situation? First, our control over the rural population, so long described as the key to our efforts, has evaporated. The Vice President tells us that the pacification program has stopped. Reports from the field indicate that the South Vietnamese Army has greatly increased its tendency to, quote, pull into its compounds in cities and towns, especially at night, reduce its patrolling, and leave the militia and the revolutionary development cadres open to enemy incursion and to enemy attack. Undoubtedly, this is one reason why, over the period of the last 2 weeks, our combat deaths were so much greater than those of the South Vietnamese. Our combat deaths over the period of the last 2 weeks were over 1,000. The South Vietnamese, whose land it is, whose country it is, whose conflict it is, with less than half that amount. I think that's an indication of the direction that we're moving, that this has become an American war, that this is no longer the war of the South Vietnamese. The debate in the assembly of the South Vietnamese parliament, as a man got up when they discussed whether they should draft 18-year-olds or 19-year-olds, he said, why should we draft young men of 18-year-olds and 19-year-olds? Why should we draft them for the South Vietnamese army? Why should they be sent to fight America's war for them? I don't think that's satisfactory. And I think it should be changed. Like it or not, the government of South Vietnam is pursuing an enclave policy. Its writ runs where American arms protect it, that far and no further. To extend the power of the Saigon government over its own country, we now can see will be in essence equivalent to the reconquest and the occupation of most of the entire nation. Let us clearly understand the full implications of that fact. The point of our pacification operations was always described as winning the hearts and the minds of the people. We recognized that giving the countryside military security against the Viet Cong would be futile. Indeed, that it would be impossible, unless the people of the countryside themselves came to identify their interests with ours and to assist not the Viet Cong, but the Saigon government. For this, we recognized that their minds had to be changed, that their natural inclination would be to support the Viet Cong, or at best to remain passive, rather than to sacrifice themselves for the foreign white man or for the remote Saigon government. It is this effort that has been most gravely set back over the period of the last several months. We cannot change the minds of people in villages controlled by the enemy. The fact is, as we all recognize, that we cannot reassert control over those villages now in enemy hands without repeating the whole bloody process of destruction which has ravaged the countryside of South Vietnam throughout the last 3 years. Nor could we thus keep control without the presence of millions of American troops. If in the years those villages and hamlets were controlled by Saigon, in those years, the government had brought honesty and social reform and land reform. If that had happened, if the many promises of a new and a better life for the people had been fulfilled, then in the process of reconquest, we might come back as liberators, just as we did in Europe, despite the devastation of the war in 1944 and 1945. But the fact is, as everybody knows, everybody who's been there, everybody who has examined the situation, the fact is that the promises of reform were not kept. Corruption and abuse of administrative power have continued even up to the present day. Land reform has never been more than an empty promise. Viewing the performance of the Saigon government over the period of the last 3 years, there is no reason for the South Vietnamese peasant to fight for the extension of its authority, or to view the further devastation that effort will bring as anything but a calamity for them, so that the political war, so long described as the only war that counts, has gone with the pacification program that was to win it. In a real sense, it may be lost and it may be gone forever. The second evident fact of the last 2 months is that the Saigon government is no more or better an ally than it was before, that it may be even less, and that the war inexorably is growing more, not less, an American effort. American officials continue to talk about a government newly energized, moving, they say, with great confidence, taking, as they say and they describe it, hold remarkably well, doing a very, very good piece of work, of recovery. I was in the executive branch of the government from 1961 to 1964. In all those years, we heard the same glowing promises about the South Vietnamese government. Corruption would soon be eliminated. Land reform would soon come. Programs were being infused for the first time with new energy. But those statements, those claims, were not the fact. They were not the fact then, and when they are stated today, they are not the fact now. The facts are that there is still no total mobilization, no price or wage controls, no rationing, no overtime work. The facts are, as a committee of the House of Representatives has told us, that land reform is moving backwards, with the government forces helping landlords to collect exorbitant back rents from the peasants whom they expect to fight this war. And the facts, again the facts are that 18-year-old South Vietnamese the facts are that 18-year-old South Vietnamese are still not being drafted, though now, as many times in the past, we have been assured that that will happen very, very soon. The facts are that thousands of young South Vietnamese buy their deferments from military service, while American Marines die today in Quezon. I don't accept that as acceptable. If the South Vietnamese government feels that Quezon is so important, let them put South Vietnamese soldiers up there and take the Marines out. And the fact is, further in the political field, that the government has arrested monks and labor leaders, former presidential candidates, and government officials, including prominent members of the Committee for the Preservation of the Nation, in which American officials placed such high hopes just a few weeks ago. Meanwhile, the government's enormous corruption continues, debilitating South Vietnam and crippling our effort to help its people. Committees of the Senate and the House of Representatives officially documented the existence, the extent, and the results of that corruption. American aid money stolen, food diverted from refugees, government posts bought and sold while essential tasks remain undone. A subcommittee of the Senate Committee on Government Operations has reported that the Vietnamese collector of customs has engaged in smuggling gold and opium, and that he was protected by figures even higher in the government. President Johnson has responded to the criticism of corruption in Vietnam by reminding us that there is stealing in Beaumont, Texas. I, for one, do not believe that Beaumont is so corrupt. President Johnson will not stick up for Beaumont, Texas. I am here to say I'm going to stick up for Beaumont, Texas. I deeply resent the criticism of Beaumont. I do not believe that any public official in any American city is engaged at the present time in smuggling gold and dope, selling draft deferments, or pocketing millions of dollars in United States government funds. And if any official of the United States government has such evidence and has such information, I think he should turn it over to the Department of Justice and the Attorney General. But however corrupt any city in the United States may be, that corruption is not costing the lives of American soldiers. While the pervasive corruption of the government in Vietnam, as an American official has told us, not what I am saying, but what an American official in Vietnam has said, is a significant cause for the prolongation of the war in Vietnam and the continued American casualties. As this government continues on its present course, and our support for it continues, the effect can only be to leave us totally isolated from the people of Vietnam. And I believe that our fighting men in South Vietnam deserve better than that. Third, it is becoming more evident with every passing day that the victories we achieve will only come at the cost of the destruction of the nation we once hoped to help. Even before this winter, Vietnam and its people were disintegrating under the blows of war. Now hardly a city in Vietnam has been spared from the new ravages of the past 2 months. Saigon officials say that nearly 750,000 new refugees have been created to add to the existing refugee population of 2 million or more. That would be the equivalent here in the United States. If we had equivalent of 35 to 40 million people who were refugees and placed in refugee camps. No one really knows the number of civilian casualties. The city of Hue, with most of the country's cultural and artistic heritage, lies in ruins. Of its population of 145,000, it has been reported that fully 113 are said to be homeless. There is not enough food, not enough shelter, and not enough medical care. There is only death, there is only misery, and there is only destruction. An American commander said of the town of Bến Tre, it became necessary to destroy the town in order to save it. That kind of salvation is not, in my judgment, an act that we here in the United States can presume to perform for them. For we must ask our government, we must ask ourselves, for we are responsible, not just those in Washington, not just those in the executive branch of the government, but all of us in this country. I'm responsible and you are responsible because this action is taking place in Vietnam in our name, in the name of the United States of America. And we have the right to ask questions, and we must ask questions of our own government and of ourselves. Where does this logic end? Where does it end? If it becomes necessary to destroy all of South Vietnam in order, quote, to save it, will we here in the United States, will we do that too? Is that what we want? Is that what we stand for? I can't believe that's true. And if we care so little about South Vietnam that we are willing to see the land destroyed and its people dead, then I ask, why are we there in the first place? Can we ordain to ourselves the awful majesty of God to decide what cities and what villages are to be destroyed, who will live and who will die, And who will join the refugees wandering in the desert of our own creation? If it is true that we have made a commitment to the South Vietnamese people, we must ask, are they being consulted in Hue, or in Binh Tre, or in the villages from which the 3 million refugees have fled? If they believe that all of this death and all of this destruction are a lesser evil than the Viet Cong, why did they not warn us when the Viet Cong came into Hue and the dozens of other cities before the Tet Offensive? And why, I ask you, did they not join the fight? It is also said that we are protecting Thailand, that if we don't fight in Vietnam, if we don't make this effort in Vietnam, then we're going to have to fight in Thailand. Or perhaps we are going to fight in Hawaii, and we're going to have to oppose the legions of communists in some of these other countries. Are we really protecting the rest of Southeast Asia by spreading this conflict? And in any case, again, in any case, let us ask ourselves, is the destruction of South Vietnam and its people a permissible means of defense? Let us have no misunderstanding. The Viet Cong are a brutal enemy indeed. Time and time again, they have shown their willingness to sacrifice innocent civilians, to engage in torture and murder, and despicable terror to achieve their ends. There can be no easy moral answer to this war, no one-sided condemnation of American action. I don't believe that the people of South Vietnam want domination and control by the Viet Cong, the National Liberation Front, or the Communists, or North Vietnam. But neither do I believe that they want to be dominated by the United States of America or by any foreign power. What we must ask ourselves is whether we have a right to bring so much destruction to another land without clear and convincing evidence that this is what its people want. But that is precisely the evidence that we do not have. What they want is peace, not domination by any outside force. And that is what we are really committed to help bring them. Not in some indefinite future, but while some scraps of life remain still to be saved from the Holocaust. The fourth fact is that now more clear than ever before, is that the war in Vietnam, far from being the last critical test for the United States, is in fact weakening our position in Asia and around the world, and eroding the structure of international cooperation, which has directly supported our security for the past 3 decades. In purely military terms, the war has already stripped us of our graduated response capability that we have labored so hard to build over the period of the last 7 years, beginning in 1961. Surely the North Koreans were emboldened to seize the Pueblo because they knew that the United States simply cannot afford to fight another Asian war while we are so tied down in Vietnam. We set out to prove our willingness to keep our commitments everywhere in the world. What we are ensuring instead, that it is most unlikely that the American people would ever again be willing to engage in this kind of a struggle. Meanwhile, our oldest and our strongest allies pull back to their own shores, leaving us alone to police all of Asia, while Mao and his Chinese comrades sit patiently by, fighting us to the last Vietnamese, watching us weaken a nation which might have provided a stout barrier against Chinese expansion southward. As Secretary Rusk said just last week, when someone asked, one member of the Foreign Relations Committee asked him, what do you think about the Chinese coming in and helping the North Vietnamese? And he said, the Chinese will never come into North Vietnam because the people and the government of North Vietnam don't want the Chinese there. A most interesting and, my judgment, significant response in view of the effort and the struggle that we are conducting in Southeast Asia. There they are, the Chinese, hoping that the war in South Vietnam will further tie us down, and perhaps in protracted war in Cambodia, Laos, and Thailand, confident as it is reported from Hong Kong that the war in Vietnam will increasingly, and I quote, bog down the United States, sap its resources, discredit its power pretensions, alienate its allies, and fray its ties with the Soviet Union, and at the same time aggravating a dissension among Americans at home. As a one American observer puts it, truly, we seem to be playing the script the way Mao wrote it. All this bears directly and heavily on whether more troops should now be sent to Vietnam, and if more are sent, what their mission will be. We are entitled to ask, we are required to ask, how many more men, how many more lives, how much more destruction will be asked to provide the military victory that is always just around the corner, to pour into this bottomless pit of our dreams. But this question, the administration does not and it cannot answer. It has no answer, none but the ever-expanding use of military force and the lives of our brave soldiers in a conflict where military force has failed to solve anything in the past. The President has offered to negotiate, yet this weekend he told us again that he seeks not compromise but victory. At the negotiating table, if possible, it was said, on the battlefield, if necessary. But at a real negotiating table, there can be no victory for either side, only a painful and a difficult compromise. To seek victory at the conference table is to ensure that you will never reach it. Instead, the war will go on. The war will go on, year after terrible year, until those who sit in the seats of high policy are men who seek another path. And I believe that that must be done this year. And it is for that reason that I offer myself as a candidate for President of the United States. Past time to ask, what is this war doing to us? Of course it is costing us money, fully 1/4 of our federal budget, but that is the smallest price that we pay. The cost is our young men, the tens of thousands of their lives cut off and ended forever. The cost is our world position, with neutrals and allies alike, every day more baffled by the strain and estranged from the policy that they cannot understand. Higher yet is the price that we pay in our innermost lives and in the spirit of this country and in the soul and the heart of the United States. For the first time in a century, we have open resistance to service in the cause of our nation. For the first time, perhaps in our history, we have desertions from our army on political and moral grounds. The front pages of our newspapers show photographs of American soldiers torturing prisoners. Every night, we watch horror on the evening news. Violence spreads inexorably across this nation, filling our streets and crippling our lives. And whatever the cost to us, let us think of the young men that we have sent there, not just the killed, but those who have to kill, not just the maimed, but all those who must look upon the results of what they are forced and have to do. It may be asked, is not such degradation the cost of all wars? And of course it is. That is why war is not an enterprise lightly to be undertaken, nor prolonged. One moment past, its absolute necessity. All this, the destruction of South Vietnam, the destruction of the North, the cost to ourselves, the danger to the world, all this we would be willing to stand if it seemed to serve some worthwhile end. But the cost of the war, present course, the cost of the war's present course far outweigh anything we can reasonably and responsibly hope to gain by it, for ourselves or for the people of Vietnam. It must be ended, and in my judgment, it can be ended. In a peace of brave men who fought each other with a terrible fury, each believing that he and he alone was in the right. We have prayed to different gods, and the prayers of neither have been answered fully. Now, while there is still time for some of them to be partially answered, now is the time to stop. And the fact is that much can be done. And it does not involve giving up, but it does involve not continuing to follow the bankrupt policy that we're following at the present time. We can, as I have urged for 2 years, but as we have never done, negotiate and announce our willingness to negotiate with the National Liberation Front. We can, as we have never done, assure the front a genuine place in the political life of South Vietnam. We can, as we are refusing to do today, begin to de-escalate the war, concentrate on protecting populated areas, and thus save American lives and slow down the destruction of the countryside. We can stop the bombing and we can go to the negotiating table as the North Vietnamese have said that they will do. And we can end the search and the destroy missions. We can, as we have never done, insist that the government of South Vietnam broaden its base, institute real reforms, and seek an honorable settlement with their fellow countrymen. This is no radical program of surrender. This is no sellout of American interests. This is a modest and a reasonable program, a program that I have been discussing over the period of the last 2 years, which would have been easier 2 years ago than it is now, which would have been easier a year ago than it is now, which would have been easier 3 months ago than it is now, but which will be more difficult 6 months from now than it is at the present time, and I think we should move ahead now. This program would be far more effective than the present course of this administration, whose only response to failure is to repeat it on a larger scale. This program, with its more limited course, would indeed be far more likely to accomplish our true objectives, and therefore even this modest and reasonable program is impossible while our present leadership, under the illusion that military victory is just ahead, plunges deeper into the swamp that is our present course. So I come here today to this great university to ask for your help, not for me, but for your country and for the people of Vietnam and for the peace of all mankind. You are the people, as President Kennedy said, who have the least ties to the present and the greatest stake in the future. I urge you to learn the harsh facts that lurk behind the mask of official illusion with which we have concealed our true circumstances, even from ourselves. Our country is in danger, not just from foreign enemies, but above all from our own misguided policies and what they can do to this nation that Thomas Jefferson once said was the last great hope of mankind. There is a contest on, not for the rule of America, but for the heart of America. And these next 8 months, we are going to decide what this country will stand for and what kind of men we are.
So I ask for your help in the cities and the homes of this state, in the towns and on its farms, contributing your concern and your action, warning of the danger of what we are doing, and the promise of what we can do in the future. I ask for your help. I ask you, as tens of thousands of young men and women are doing all over this land, to organize yourselves and then go forth and work for new policies, not just in Southeast Asia, but here at home as well, in the state of Kansas, across the United States, in our cities, in our rural areas, in our towns, so that we have a new birth for this country, that we have a new light to guide us. And I pledge, if you give me your help, if you give me your hand, that I will work with you and we will have a new America. Thank you very much.
Certainly an overwhelmingly complex and frustrating international problem. I'm sure I speak for everyone who was within the sound of your voice when I say that we hope that you will always look back upon your address here and the response of your audience as a demonstration of the affection and respect in which you are held here on this campus and in the state of Kansas. The Senator has graciously agreed to answer questions, and we will alternate, as we've done in the past, between questions from students and questions from the press.
Senator.
Ray Morgan of the Kansas City Star.
Senator, I think you see from what's been done here today, there is support for opposition to the administration policy. What I would ask you is, in view of the positions that you and Senator McCarthy have taken, how do you avoid dissipating the opposition to this administration within the Democratic Party? When and how do you think you will reach agreement with it?
2 people are better than 1, and 2,000 people are better than 2, and 10 million people are better than any of us. I think we're going to work together to suggest what we're doing wrong, and each of us is going to the American people and suggesting alternative policies for the future. I think only the American people can gain. The Democratic Party can gain, but the American people can gain by having the widest possible choice. And I intend to go across this country and not talk just about what I think we've done wrong in the past, but what I think we can do in the future. And that's what I intend to do.
We'll have our next question from a student.
Gordon Olson, student, Kansas State University.
I lost you. Where are you?
Senator Kennedy, putting yourself in the president's place, wouldn't you refuse...
Well, I'm trying to do that.
Okay. Wouldn't you refuse to let a commission set up by your political opponents take away your powers as chief executive to fight a war?
For the first place, it's not a commission that would be established. The question is about the commission that was discussed by Secretary of Defense Clifford and by me several days ago. It's not a commission that's taking any power away from the President of the United States. Absolutely no power is being taken away from the President of the United States. It's a commission, and my deep concern is that the people of the United States are so divided. My deep concern is that we've been following the same course and the same policy over the period of the last 3 years, and we don't have a new policy. We have no idea what to do in Vietnam other than to react by sending more men. And it was my feeling that if we've got some of the most eminent citizens, such as General Norstad, who was in charge of NATO, General Ridgway, who was in charge of our military forces in Korea, Ambassador Reischauer, who was ambassador to Japan, Mike Mansfield of the Senate of the United States, John Sherman Cooper, a distinguished member of the Senate of the United States, a Republican, Carl Kazin, head of the Princeton Institute. If we had people of this caliber and of this kind who would make a study of the war of Vietnam, make a study of what we are doing in Southeast Asia, and make some suggestions and recommendations as to what we might do in the future, then I would think that was not only in the interest of the President of the United States, but is in the interest of the United States of America. And that's why I felt and still feel that it would have been so valuable to all of our citizens. If they came in with some suggestions, they might very well have a new course of action which could gain greater support within our country and at least partially end the division that exists in the United States. They might also come up with a policy, and I believe that they could, that could end the war in Vietnam and bring peace to that ravaged land and end the conflict that exists within our own country, and that's what I had in mind, and I'm glad that I did it.
One more question from the press.
Senator Kennedy, Dean Kerfman, Card TV, Wichita. Aside from your basic differences with the President over Vietnam policies, in what areas concerning the country's leadership, other than that, do you find him lacking?
Well, I think one of the other major areas is and the major crises that affects all of us, not just those of us who come from urban centers, but for all across the country. I think that we can't say that because we have difficulty or problems in one section of the United States that it doesn't affect another part of the country. If the farm prices go down in the state of Kansas, if the economy is poor and slow, that has an effect on the urban centers of the East. The same thing if there are riots, disorders, and lawlessness in our big urban centers in the United States, as it was last summer. If we have it next summer, and as President Johnson said, we can expect to have this summer after summer for the future. I don't think that's satisfactory. He appointed a commission 8 months ago to study what the causes were and to make some suggestions and recommendations. They came out with their report several weeks ago. He said nothing in commendation of that report. He said no words of approval of that report. And over the period since the riots that we had last summer, the President of the United States has made no recommendations or suggestions which will change the course of action so that we can head them off. I think that there's a lot that we can do to head them off. One of the first things I would do is to provide jobs for all those who need them. I provide jobs in the urban centers. I provide jobs in our Indian reservations. I provide jobs for our... Let me just say this. We have a gross national product of $800 billion. A gross national product of $800 billion. We spend $3 billion here in the United States on pets. On pets alone. We spend $30 billion on the war in Vietnam.